Enter to win a new Surfskate every month at surfskate.love/giveaway.
Hello, my name is David, and today I'm going to be talking about skid plates. If you're interested in doing any surfskate maneuvers that involve your tail reaching the ground, which can be pivoting on your tail or dragging your tail across the ground, or ollie-based maneuvers, kick flips, ollieing onto curbs, ledges, I highly suggest that you watch this entire video. And I also ask that you like this video and subscribe to the channel because it helps us out. I'm going to tell you what skid plates are, why I started riding them, why you should consider riding them, what the drawbacks to skid plates are, in my opinion. I'm going to go ahead and show you some tricks that have been made a lot easier thanks to having a skid plate. Skid plates are an old skateboard adapter that you put on your tail, and the idea is that whenever you skid your tail across the ground, that it protects the integrity of your tail and prevents it from getting thinner, or what we call razor tail. It's basically an abrasion resistant plastic material. I've started riding skid plates, and not for the abrasion resistant component, but for an entirely different reason. So the reason I came into riding skid plates is because I've started wanting to get back into a lot of the tricks I used to do, which tend to be ollie based. Other tricks I like to do involving the tail reaching the ground are 5/0 grinds, where you grind the back truck on coping and your tail drags sometimes. And in general, just pivoting on your tail is something that I do sometimes. But one thing I noticed is that on a surf skate, this tends to feel a lot more difficult to me than a regular skateboard. So this is a very standard street skateboard, 8 1/8 inch wide with 52 millimeter wheels. I'm not going to go into a lot of other components about this board. We're just going to talk about the tail and the skid plate. But one thing that I noticed is whenever I do ollies on a regular street skateboard like this one, it tends to feel a lot easier, and the tail feels like it gets to the ground faster, and the angle that the deck rests at when the tail reaches the ground tends to feel a lot less steep. And so let's take a look at that angle. I have my angle gauge here, and I'm going to rest it on the base plate, and we're just going to zero it out. And when I zero it out and I push the tail to the ground, I get a reading of 37.0 degrees. In the center of the board, 36.9 degrees, and at the front of the board, 37.5 degrees. So about 37 to 37.5 degrees. And now I'm going to show you a different setup that I have. So this is my Black Label deck on a set of Carver CX trucks with 62 millimeter wheels. But with this surf skate, whenever I measure the angle, I'm going to zero out my angle gauge. Here I get a reading of 41.5 degrees at the rear base plate, 41 degrees even in the center, 41 degrees at the front. And so we're talking a difference of about 3.5 to 4 degrees. And so whenever you have a greater distance from the rear of the tail to the ground, you often end up getting a steeper angle of the deck. You have to bring your front foot higher in order to ollie, and it basically makes ollies a lot harder in my opinion, as well as other tricks involving skidding your tail across the ground, because you're dealing with a steeper angle, which is going to push your body weight back more, and you're going to have to compensate more by leaning forward over a higher front leg. The way that I think about skid plates is the same as I think about riser pads. People will put riser pads between the base plate of their truck and the deck in order to increase the clearance that the wheel has to the deck to remove wheel bite. And similarly, you can add skid plates to your deck in order to reduce the distance that your tail has to travel to the ground. So I'm going to illustrate something here. I've got my phone case, and it's about the same width as a skid plate. And so I'm going to show you what happens whenever I put my phone case underneath my tail to simulate having a skid plate here. Now I get 38.3 degrees at the rear base plate. So these measurements are not exact, they're not perfect, but it illustrates the point that whenever I put something under my tail, that you get a lower angle of your deck, which is going to decrease the distance that your tail has to travel to reach the ground. And so that brings us back to my Carver CX setup that I have here. And one more time, zero out my angle gauge. and I rest my tail on the ground. Now I'm getting a read of 36.1 degrees at the rear base plate, 36.1 degrees in the center, and 35.5 degrees at the front. Now that I have a skid plate on my tail here, the distance that my tail has to travel to the ground is less, and my angle is not as steep, which is going to make tricks like 5-0 grinds and ollies, kickflips, things like that a lot easier. All of those problems have been fixed thanks to having a 1/2 inch thick skid plate. So what are the drawbacks of having a skid plate? Well, there's not really any that I can tell. One that I can think of is if you just don't like how it looks and you're not interested in screwing holes into your deck because it involves putting holes in the top of your deck here and drilling throughs, that's the biggest drawback. I bought this one, it's a PAL tailbone, and so I got it from PAL Peralta, and it cost about $9 US. One of the other difficulties with skid plates can be finding the right size, so PAL only makes these in one size, and this is 8.1 inches wide. As you can see, it doesn't meet the width of my deck, but I placed it in the place where I usually skid the most, which is on this side of my board, which is my heel side, and I left space up here because I just didn't have any more skid plate material to go up here. It would have been nice to have though. And I've looked online, and to me the best resource for buying a good skid plate of different sizes is Seismic. They have a few different sizes, with their largest being 7.1 inches long from here to here. And then they have other models that range smaller if you have a narrower tail. Installation of these skid plates tends to be very easy. All you really need is a drill, and it just involves mounting holes, and it's just a few screws. So in conclusion, skid plates are an excellent way to help improve your surf skate ollies, to help improve any trick that involves dragging your tail across the ground. And that's all I got to say about that. Have fun, go skate.